My name's Travis Hewitt Roach. I'm a Jamaican American illustrator from the Bronx and Manhattan. Lived here for about 11 years now, since I was 11. Was born in Harlem Hospital and moved here. I live like in the corner of 167 and Grant.
But you didn't grow up in the Bronx, you were born in Harlem. Can you tell me about those humble beginnings? What was that like before the move to the Bronx?
Sure. So I lived in Manhattan for about 11 years. I literally moved the day after my 5th grade graduation. I think on the same day as my 5th grade graduation, actually. But yeah, Manhattan was great. I lived on 116th and Malcolm X, or Lenox, depending on what you call it. And I knew everyone in my building. I was like a semi-popular kid, played basketball in the park across the street with kids from the projects that were adjacent to the park. I was friends with like the super in my building. I would get locked out often or leave my keys somewhere. I remember my mom gave me keys when I was like about 8, and I took them to recess in 4th grade, and I don't know what happened to them after that. So we'd go out to the neighbors. Had like a lot of friends in my building, and yeah. Then after 5th grade, when I moved to the Bronx, I didn't know anybody. I realized a lot of people in my neighborhood didn't even speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish at the time. So it was a real
You didn't
culture.
speak Spanish at the time,
Didn't
but
sp-
then you
Yeah, I
learned
learned it over time, like enough for a conversation. Like I'm going to the bodega or something, and I can like talk to the cashier. But otherwise, I would just stay in my room, play a lot of video games, because yeah, there wasn't really much else to do. I think everyone else, my buildings are really new, so a lot of people that were living on the block had also just moved there from like other places like the North Bronx or Washington Heights, and we all didn't know each other at the time, and so it took a couple of years before we all got comfortable with each other.
What was the transition like, the adjustment period moving from Harlem to the Bronx?
So the transition was really difficult. Moving from Manhattan to the Bronx, like I said, it was a huge cultural change, and also, especially for me as like a young child, for like my mom and my brother, it was great for them because they came to this country about 3 years before I was born, and my mom had been working like $3 an hour in like a retail store. I remember the address, I remember the zip code, I remember the phone number, I remember everything about it. Like when I moved to the Bronx, actually, it was really hard for me to remember where I live.
Did you visit the old address?
Yeah, I visited. One time I went with my mom and we saw like the super who was still there and he was still in the building. And I've been there now as an adult and I have like the freedom to roam around wherever I want without my mom. I've been there a couple of times, but the neighborhood's changed completely. It's not exact, like the buildings are still the same. Some of the things are still the same. There's this liquor store in the corner that's been there probably since the 30s. But yeah, a lot of the people who are there, I don't know them obviously. The park looks a little different. Like things are a little different.
What age did you begin getting into art, drawing, what have you? When did you start developing that interest?
So I started developing my interest in art, not to sound like a broken record, but probably for as long as I can remember. Like I know everybody says that, but it's pretty much true. I think the first like memorable experience I had with art is probably like 1 children's books and then 2 like drawing with crayons. So I can remember like a moment in like preschool or kindergarten where like I had like the book Madeline and Corduroy, and I love both those books. And A Snowy Day, if you know that one. I couldn't read any of them probably at the time, or maybe I could, I don't know. But I remember like looking at the pictures and being like enamored with like, the color, the drawing, everything about them, and I felt like those drawings and paintings were enough to tell the story without the words, and I think that's come to what makes great children's literature. And another thing that I remember in like 1st grade is like every time I would go into the first day of school, it would always smell like crayons. I don't know why, but I have that distinct smell of crayons in the air, and that always like reminds me of like the good times of being a child. Like if someone talks about the good old days, I think of just like the smell of wax crayons.
So when you moved to the Bronx, you said that was 10 years, and you said you had 3 years of kind of isolation, adjusting. It was a difficult process. In that time, you were tucked away more in your room, playing video games. Did you really start to hone your skills more as an artist?
I think in those days, I wasn't so much like the transitional period from the Manhattan to the Bronx when it came to art. I don't think I was really advancing my skills as an artist, but more so as like a critical thinker when it came to art. So when I was thinking about video games at that time, like it was partially to have fun playing video games, but I was also looking at the art. Like a lot of the games I was really into were 2D video games, like Street Fighter at that time was completely 2D. I was playing like a lot of Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo because I was using hand-me-downs for my brother, and a lot of those things were 2D. And I was looking more at like the art style. I was looking at like the colors they use, like how one color complemented another color really well, and how those like kept like the excitement both of like myself as a child, but also like my older brother, who when I was 11, he's like 19, 20, but still enjoying the same games that I am. And I think a lot of that had to do with the artwork, and insofar as much as like the storytelling as well. And I think growing up, like those things, when you can remember those things, and when you become an adult, you can put them together, and obviously that's what helps you create like good stories, helps you create good illustrations, helps you create good logos and designs. It's being able to tell the story while simultaneously making it look good.
Did your family encourage your interest in drawing? Were your brothers? You're laughing. Is that?
Yeah, I'm laughing a lot. It's a funny question.
Say that again.
It's a funny question. It's a real funny question. So at first, they were a little annoyed by it. I don't know. I mean, me personally, being like an immigrant background from the island of Jamaica, people there don't really like the art. Like the art scene's only like becoming to come up, in my opinion, at least. I feel like things like, if in terms of arts, things like literature, poetry, like those things are seen as being like, those are good, like those are fine. But when it comes to painting, they still have this idea of like the starving artist, or at least my family did at the time. So when I said I wanted to like, oh, like I think it'd be cool to like draw comics for a living, or make like logo designs, or make art for video games and stuff like that, they're like, oh, like especially my mom, she's like, oh, like, you know, you might be a starving artist one day, like that kind of idea. So growing up, they weren't exactly too fond of it. And to this day, like I have a job now, I don't think my grandma is still too accepting of it. And that's fine for me. Like it's like I can live my life. Like no one really like is trying to stop me from doing it. Like when I went to college and I went to do illustration and went to do like comic art and things like that, no one was trying to stop me. It was obviously like I can do whatever I want. But it took some time for them to get used to. And I can definitely say now, like my mom and my brother and my dad, like they all see what I'm doing and they're like, oh, like he can make a living. He's not quote unquote starving. Like that doesn't exactly exist. If you can find the job to do it, then like you'll be fine. That's all it really takes. And like now they're like, oh, he's gonna be fine.
So can you tell me more about the path that you apparently was laid out for you in terms of a career or occupation?
Yeah, so in terms of occupation, there was never like a set specific kind of job that they expected me to do, but they expected me to do something that was more like scholarly and academic, like let's say like a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, something like within that field.
Who's those? Is it your parents specifically? Or
yeah, basically my parents. So my mom is a teacher. She has a master's degree in childhood education. She's taught like college classes on and off for like the last 7 years. And my stepdad, he was a federal agent with the United States government, and he also like worked with the Army for basically until like I finished high school. So like a large span of time, about like 40, 50 years. And yeah, so they expected that in school, like I was a pretty good student. I graduated first in my class in 5th grade and in 12th grade. So they were expecting that I would become like, you know, oh, like this big shot lawyer, or I'd be in an Ivy League school, like these kind of things. And then I said to them, oh, I want to do art at FIT. And you know, I wanna draw and paint for the rest of my life, and they're just like, what did we do wrong? Like not in those words exactly, but they had that idea of like, this is not what we expected to happen. I mean, when I first got the idea that they didn't accept it, I was in 6th grade, so I was like pretty upset. Obviously, like, as a child, like I didn't understand like it was like that, why don't my parents accept me and like the things I like kind of thing. And I didn't really get out of that until like the year after I graduated from college. So that's like a large span of time where like I was pretty much just upset at this idea of my parents not fully accepting like me doing art. And it was really like after I finished school and I was out in the real world that I still think that no matter what route I would have taken, I would still come back to art at some point. But because I was in school and because I was out in the real world, like I understood better what they were afraid of. Like it wasn't so like I became to understand that it wasn't so much that they didn't believe in like my own ability, which as a child that's more so what you think it is. Like they don't think I can do it, but I began to understand that it was more so that it's just hard for anybody to do it. So like you have people who want to be actors or they want to be producers, and like with any field really, it's like really hard to break into. So I guess they were just afraid, and like I understand that like if I had a kid, and I had just like moved to a country it's completely different from my own growing up, and I had like these high hopes for them, or they were doing like this kind of thing before they became an adult, and now they're doing this completely other thing. I would also be scared. Like change is scary, so I definitely understand better where they were coming from, and I think as they've gotten older, they've better understood where I'm coming from. So now we reach like this great happy medium where we're all just accepting and happy with the routes that we've all taken.
From charter school to parochial school to SUNY Fashion Institute of Technology, what got you into fashion?
Well, when I got in, I wasn't exactly into fashion. The fashion thing, well, getting more into fashion like came as an about of like going to that school and also being in a relationship with a fashion design major. So fashion just slowly became integrated into my life. Originally, I was going to do computer animation because like I thought, oh, I want to like make animations, I want to make cartoons, I want to work on video games, like that kind of thing. And then I took some computer animation classes, and I was like, I hate this. I don't want to do this. I hate this so much. Like I would use 3DS. It's a program called 3ds Max, or if you've heard of Maya or any of these like rendering softwares. And like I know a lot of people who they can do them, and they're like, oh, it's easy. And then I do them, and I'm just like, I can't think in 3 planes really, unless it's like sculpture. Like I can't do it on a computer. So sticking with illustration worked out way better for me, and like learning how to like oil paint and just learning classical drawing, that was way more up my alley.
You're classically trained in drawing, painting, composing, and telling a story. Can you elaborate on the last one, telling a story?
Telling a story? Yeah, I guess it is hard to be classically trained in telling a story. That's just something I like to say. But yeah, I mean, when I was in school, like another word we use for illustration is visual communication. So your entire point of making a piece isn't necessarily to make it look good, but your client has something like something they want to communicate to either like their audience, like their demographic that they're marketing to, or to like another client that they have, like a client for a client. And your job is to basically tell that story, not with words, not with speech, not with any form of recording, but solely, or even like not with text at times, just solely like visualization. So I remember specifically like this one piece that we had to do, was pretending that we were working for like the New Yorker, and they had an article about different languages and like using like how you could use your ear to like open up to new languages and learning different concepts because of that, how certain languages have certain concepts that don't exist in other languages. So my idea for that was to make like a door idea, but it's like an ear shaped like a door, and adjacent to that door is like a wall, like a giant wall, and on one side you have like this huge desert, and the other side you have like this magnificent city, and all that wall is like graffiti written in different words. So I believe I had words in English, Spanish, German, Chinese, Japanese, like different words from different languages that just they're not exactly the same word, don't have the same meaning, but it's just that if you're able to like learn all these different words, or learn all these different concepts from different languages, it opens your mind up from this like desert plain of like vacant existence to a lush city with everything going on. And just like that idea of being able to communicate that to like even like just anybody, even who doesn't speak like the same language. Like if I've seen art by people who speak like who speak Spanish or they speak French, and maybe like I speak a little bit, but I'm not like completely fluent and I don't completely understand concepts from that language. But if you see the art and they're telling the story effectively, they can still communicate the same things you would communicate in your native language.
Well, fortune.
You know, I didn't know there was a 4 train here until I went to Hayes.
I want to get that again.
Okay. You didn't know there was a 4 train until what?
Until actually, I didn't know there was. I didn't know the subway. I didn't know because when I was in Manhattan, I lived by the 2 line, the 2 and the 3, and I just thought those were the only trains. Like I didn't know any other train. So when I moved to the Bronx, yeah, I didn't know I would take the bus. I took the bus to school because I went to school in the East Bronx. I just took the bus every day. And then I remember one time I walked up to the concourse and I see like that train with a D on it. And I'm just like, what is this? And then I tried to take it to high school, to Hayes, Cardinal Hayes, good old Cardinal Hayes. I tried to take the D train and the D train doesn't stop there. So I'm in Polo Grounds, like where am I? And then, yeah, and then when I saw the 4 train near Hayes, I was like, oh, 167. I live on 167. I don't think it's the same 167. So I would take it to 161, take and transfer to the D, and then go home from there. And then one time, I had a friend who lived on 170, and then I just took it to 167th, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll get off here and see where it goes. And then I was like, wait a minute, I still live here. This is the same neighborhood. So.
I think going back to your project that bridges the gaps between different ethnic races and what have you. It's a visual language, art is a visual medium.
Yes.
What did your professors think about that?
I think a lot of the ideas I had were influenced by my professors. Illustration's like this visual language that you can use to communicate with the broadest range of human beings. Like I had a lot of professors I had one professor who's Puerto Rican, I had a professor who's Filipino, I've had a professor who's Moroccan. And
you named them?
I named them? Yeah, one of the Puerto Rican ones, Eric Velasquez. He's my favorite professor. He's like a mentor to me.
Why is he your favorite?
Why is he my favorite? Well, one of the books that I read as a child was a book written by him. It's called Grandma's Records. Giving him a shout out, giving him a plug right now. It's called Grandma's Records, and he has a bunch of other books that he does his best to put people of African descent, like African Americans, like West Africans, Latin Americans of African descent, put them at the forefront of his books. And as a child growing up of African descent, that was like really important for me. Is like seeing myself in books. So that's why I said earlier, like A Snowy Day is a really important book for me, because that was the first children's book with an African American child as the main character. So you see that and you realize that, oh, we can do this too. We can be in art. We can be in books. Another professor I had was Marcos Oxenhendler. I think he's Moroccan. I could be making that up. I don't actually know. I haven't seen him in years. I think he's Moroccan. But I'll ask him one day. But he was my favorite fashion illustration professor. Why? Just the way he taught. Like he taught us like this specific way of drawing fashion models, which I guess for him, and I guess for the industry in general, it's like good to have like that basis, like a concrete basis to work off of, so then you can project like, your own style onto and make something that's unique to yourself. The first time I used watercolor, and before that I was only using pencils and pens, so everything was black and white until I started to just learn how to use color better. Like I had seen how colors are used and I could understand how they're used, but I couldn't do it for myself at the time. And that was just like the first time I got to jump in and try it for myself.
You mentioned to me earlier that your first ever drawing was of Homer Simpson.
Homer Simpson.
So going from that, can you talk a little bit about that versus when you were a child drawing Homer Simpson to being classically trained and working on such a grandiose project?
Well, that first Homer Simpson drawing, from what I remember, he was, I don't know, I probably got it from a specific episode. He was definitely in his briefs, and he had like a towel, like superhero cape. I don't remember exactly what episode, but this is like, I'm definitely sure it was like in there. And it was really like, from what I remember, it was like scraggly. I think I did it with marker, and I like used like a yellow Crayola marker, like coloring his skin. Really crude, but I think if I saw something like that, I would be like, I would think it's really great. Like I would think like it has like this innocence to it that like only a child can create. And I think that's like what's great about when I think about how I used to draw. It's like it's ugly, but it's also amazing. And as you get older, you start to lose that because you start to learn how to make things actually look good. So you lose like some of the creativity and imagination that you had as a child because you had like no limits at that point, and now like you hold yourself to constraints. So when I got into FIT, I wanted to constrain myself more and learn like the basics and like learn how to make things look stylistically and technically amazing. And I think like me and and all the people that I went to school with, like we really like keyed in and mastered that. And in some respects, we learn the technique, and then afterwards we're trying to regain like the creativity and imagination that led us to pursue art in the first place. So it's like, yeah, that's basically it. Like just trying to get back to a stage that you were once at.
As you grow older, as humans tend to do, it's such a nice, yeah, with time and age comes wisdom. As you've gotten older, going from drawing to watercolors, painting, sculpting, what have you, illustration, all of the platforms and programs on computers.
Yes.
Do you feel like you're getting better? Do you feel like you're diversifying? You're just growing more as an artist?
Yeah, every day I feel like I'm growing as an artist, both technically and stylistically. When it comes to computer programs specifically, I mean, I work as a photo retoucher right now for a fashion company, and I'm using Photoshop every day. I have a supervisor who's been using Photoshop since 1996. I think he said, 1996. Like I don't even know if there was CS back then, but yeah. So he knows. Like I feel like I'm kind of still in school. Like I'm still learning things, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm getting paid to learn things, but he's just showing me like all these techniques that it's just advancing on what I already learned from school. And I'm also, as you saw with like my logo design, I'm learning like Illustrator more. Me and my friends did like a zine not too long ago, so I've worked in some InDesign too, and I'm just like learning other sectors of not just Adobe, but like other programs in general, and just like advancing myself as an artist. And even to this day, like I still have to draw every day. I still have to like try to paint like here and now, like whenever I have the time, because like with any like skill, if you don't keep doing that, like you're not gonna advance, you're not gonna keep learning, you're not gonna get better.
Can you tell me about your internship at the Bronx Museum of the Arts?
That internship, that was basically the first job I've ever had, and like looking back, it was an amazing experience. Like every facet of it, I can't remember a bad time or like a day like I just wasn't having fun and enjoying what I was doing. I would come in after school. I think I started like 3:15, so I'd come in after school, like a 5-minute bus ride. I would go in, and they would be like, "So Travis, we have this zine that we put out. We try to put out 3 like in the time that you're being here." And instead of saying like, "Okay, so we have these themes, and you can work inside of that," it was like, "What do you want to do?" And I thought that was amazing. It was like I have complete free reign. Like whatever I want to do, they're gonna help me make it to be the best version that I can create. So I made like a comic about. I think I had this like stupid idea. I don't know. I'm really into like environmental conservatism. So I had this dumb idea about Earth being like Earth. Obviously, we don't take the best care of nature, and I had this idea of these intergalactic like tree people who like come from like the far reaches of space to wage war on humans because of the way we've been like treating Mother Nature.
That sounds intricate.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I think they were also hipsters. It was really weird. They had like scarves and like sunglasses, and they just basically dressed the way I dressed my first year of college. And yeah, and we did that. I worked on this other project having to do with like music, and I did like a small like animation that went on the website. And yeah, it was just them helping me to do whatever I wanted. And I think if I didn't have something like that, I might have just gone into like studying like legal analysis or something like that, as opposed to doing art, because that helped me to show like this is something I really enjoy. This is something I love. This is something I can come in and do every day, and I won't get tired of it. I won't go home thinking like, what am I doing with my life? Yeah, so when it comes to being culturally influential, I think of like fashion magazines, I think of hip hop magazines, I think of art magazines. I think of things that people look to when they look to them to see what they can do to change things in their own life. So when you read when you see like an ad for like an apparel store and you're like, oh, everyone's wearing this, like, I think I need this, like that kind of influential. And I think I want to be that. I want to be that, and I want to be able to because those things shift culture. They shift the way people act. They shift the way people dress. They shift the way people view themselves. And I think I want to do that. Yes, I want to I guess positively influence not just like my neighborhood, but like I guess as far-reaching as possible in the best way I know how, which is media. And for me, I think I became that way because of the different influencers in my life, besides like your parents and like your parents, your friends, things like that. I read like a bunch of different magazines. I look at a bunch of different YouTube outlets, not just YouTube, but like videos in general, like Vimeo. And I'm always looking at interviews and listening to people and what they have done in the past, and that in turn has like changed my life. Like for example, in high school, I was like a huge emo kid. Like
really?
Yeah, I mean,
tell me about that.
Because we were in Catholic high school, like I couldn't dress that way. But outside of school, like I was wearing like I don't know, these arm warmer things, like fingerless gloves that went up to here, and they're like striped black and white. I'm sure you remember people like
yes.
that. And I had like Spider-Man earrings, like they were like earring studs, like with like the Venom symbol in them, and like guy liner, black nail polish, like all that stuff. Didn't wear Vans, but I wear Vans now. But yeah, didn't wear Vans. Didn't have like skinny black jeans yet. And over time, like looking at how older people were dressing, looking at like menswear YouTube channels, getting like streetwear magazines, like that's come to change more of like how I dress now. Like I'm way more minimalist, trying to save, mostly because I'm trying to save money, but also like just trying to look good and like just looking like how people who are in positions that I want to be in dress in. Yeah.
How do you view, or anything Harlem and the Bronx has helped shape who you are today?
I think Harlem and the Bronx shaped basically everything about myself. Like it was a thing that I'd never noticed until I went to college and I met people from like other parts of the country, and I just realized how Bronx in New York I am. Like even the way I pronounce Bronx, like I say Bronx, like that's the way I talk. So there's that, the way I style my hair.
What constitutes as bad or good art?
For me personally, bad art is, it's like I want to say when it has no technical skill behind it whatsoever, but that's not even good enough. Or that's not bad enough for me to say it's bad art. I guess bad art is when it's a combination of when it has low technical skill and also has like no message whatsoever, or it has a message that I just personally hate. Because I think bad art and good art, those are really personal terms, and you decide for yourself what those things are. But when I see artwork it's like crude, but simultaneously like it's not doing anything for you, like it's not making you better as a person, it's not teaching you anything, it's not communicating with you well, it's not attempting to communicate anything with you, like those are bad art. While good art, I think something that can't communicate with you well but still technically sound, I think that you can call that okay art. But it's something, regardless of style, still like reads to you like a good story and tells you something that you didn't know before. It's like it's attempting to teach you something that you didn't know before, or it can like adequately interprets like an ideal that you have. Like that quintessentially is good art. Like people look at Picasso, for example, and I guess when I was younger I thought Picasso was bad art simply because like just the way it looks. Like I thought it was bad art. And I mean, in a sense I kind of still think it's bad art, but when I learned the thematics behind it, then I realized it's good art. Like there's this one, I think it's called The Bombing of Guernica, where it's like a bunch of kind of like distorted bulls and people, like pure black and white, Cubist, obviously. And I used to think it was horrible. I used to think this is stupid. Like I don't understand it. But that was the problem. Like I didn't understand it. But then when I came to understand like the Spanish Civil War, and I understood like the ideals of Cubism completely, then I realized, oh, this is good art.
Any advice for young artists in the Bronx or people of any age who are pursuing an interest in art?
I definitely don't think I'm old enough or wise enough to be like handing down advice, but I can definitely say being in the Bronx and wanting to pursue art, definitely the first obstacle to overcome is just staying in the Bronx. Like the Bronx has a lot of great things. I love being in the Bronx. Like I don't think I would want to have been raised anywhere else, but simultaneously, like in order to create good art and like learn new concepts, like you got to go out to different places. So that even if it's just like Manhattan or like Brooklyn, like that magical 2 hour away place called Brooklyn, like you can just go there and like you just learn, even though it's the same city, you learn like slightly new things that you can just like bring back to your artwork and still like keep it being about the Bronx. So everyone who's interested in art should go out and see different forms of art. There's the Bronx Museum of the Arts on the Grand Concourse. You have Wave Hill by Riverdale. You also have the Bronx Art Space, Post Cottage even. Like there's just different art outlets in the Bronx that you could go to and visit and just learn new things. Another thing you have to do like while going out is also drawing outside. You can't just draw from pictures online. Like that's also 2D. You can't just draw other 2D things. You got to think in a 3-dimensional space. Because when you put like, that's the whole point of art. Like you have a 2-dimensional plane and you're trying to create this illusion of 3 dimensions. And that is just way better than anything you could ever make by just looking at a picture of someone online and copying it.